Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We got the 4Runner back from the shop. They fixed the door where we had the damage. Looks pretty nice. And as we were driving home, noticed that the brakes were starting to squeal a little bit. So it's time to do a brake job. We're gonna replace the brake pads and the rotors. So stick around and we'll check out how to do that. Hey, so before we get started, I wanted to take a second to say thanks to the new subscribers. So we really appreciate your support. If you have any questions or comments or other things you want me to do videos on, please feel free to put them down below. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're gonna need for replacing the brakes and the rotors. So we're gonna kind of work from left to right. We've got a 17mm deep socket, 21mm socket, needle nose pliers, 3/8 inch ratchet, with a 12mm socket, breakover bar, caliper hanger, torque wrench, wire brush, pry bar / screwdriver, another 1/2 inch socket, some brake cleaner, PB blaster, good old hammer, and I've got some anti-seize. Picked some of this up the other day. Thought it'd be a good chance to use some anti-seize lubricant for putting it behind the rotors so that the rotors don't get stuck onto the hub. And then of course we need the brake pads. So I got these pads and rotors from, I'll put the link below, from A1 Auto Parts or 1A Auto Parts. I don't remember what it's called, but I'll put the link down below. But as you can see, these are performance. They're drilled and slotted. So that's gonna totally add some horsepower to the old 4Runner. The other two things that we need is obviously you're gonna need a jack and a jack stand. So we're gonna slide this under. You guys know how to jack up a car. All right, so now let's remove the lug nuts. We're gonna need the 21mm and the breakover bar. And yeah, you guys probably know how to do that. All right, so now we need to take this fork off. I'm gonna use my pry bar, AKA my screwdriver, and a small persuasion tool to pop this off so that we can move this around, and then we're going to take this bolt off so that we have a lot more flexibility in our brake lines to hang this caliper up once we take it off. So let's take that off real fast. So now once we have this loose, now we can start by taking the brake pads out. So we're going to take these brake pads out and these pins out, and then we'll be able to get to the caliper, remove those caliper bolts, and then hang the caliper up here and out of the way so we can pull the rotor off. So first thing, get your needle nose pliers and pull these pins out, or the clips out. And then the new pads come with new pins, so we don't necessarily have to keep those. And if they're a little tricky to get out, sometimes it helps to have again, your persuasion tool. And you want to take out this clip, and these things are just in that hole right there, and so once you get that pulled out, your brake pads will be free. Now these may not slide right out because these pistons are pressed up against the pad and against the rotor, so we're going to need something to relax that piston a little bit. So we're going to, and again, we're replacing the rotor and the pads, so we don't, or we're not a little worried too much about damaging or marking up the rotors. But as we do this, we're pushing this piston in, which is pushing brake fluid back into the lines. And so once we get this one flush, we're going to check the reservoir, make sure it's not overflowing. All right, so here's our reservoir. You can see here's the line. The max line is right here. So we're probably going to be okay, but I usually just take the lid off just in case I need to siphon some out. But yeah, I think we're going to be good. So let's go compress that other piston. All right, so like I said, I usually pull these pads out in the way that they come out. That way I know which way the new ones are going to go in. So I kind of situate them like that. So I know that one goes in the front, or that one goes in the back, this one goes in the front. So now we've got caliper empty and ready to get removed. So there's 2 bolts back here that we need to take off. One's right here. Can you see that? This bolt right here. And then this bolt up here on top. And that's a 17 millimeter. And these are gonna be pretty snug, so it'll take some doing to loosen, but you can get to it. A little cheater pipe will be out in no time. Now we'll get the top one. So we got that last bolt out. Now here's the part where you need to be real careful, because all these are connected, so you want to make sure you're not putting any stress on those lines. You need to hook your caliper in. Okay, so now none of these lines are in peril or stress, so we're good. All right, so now comes the really fun part, is getting this rotor off. Now, there's nothing holding it on at this point except all the rust. So, best thing to do is just to gently persuade it off. And just in case it happens to really come free, I don't want it to fall on my foot. So I'm gonna put this lug on there, not all the way in. So, as you can see, it's pretty tight in there. So I'm just gonna tap it right here because this is where it's rusted in. And you can see all the rust kind of falling on the ground. And now, you know, sometimes that doesn't help. So yeah, we're replacing this rotor, so whatever. All right, so now let's take this. Take this nut off and pull the rotor out. All right, so now this is all rusted. So that's what you got this wire brush for. So you just want to clean this up real nice and get all this rust off as best you can. And just run it in between like that. So it's nice and clean in there. And then we'll wipe it down, make sure that's nice and smooth, and then get all the dirt off, and then we'll get the new rotor on. All right, so now we've got this cleaned off. You want to wipe it down and get all the loose pieces, you know, off. And then once you have that, then go ahead and spray it with this spray paint. And so what that's going to do is it'll keep it from sticking to the new rotor, so that we won't have all the trouble getting it off next time when we need to do a brake job. I kind of made a mess, so it's a good idea to clean that up off of these other parts, so that I'm not going to use. So go ahead and clean that up as well. Okay, now it's time to get the new rotors. And you can see that this is G-coded, and that's a real nice feature. I actually don't know what that does. Okay. So, one thing we're gonna do to these rotors before we finish putting them on is we're gonna spray a little bit of brake cleaner on them and then wipe them off. So how I do that is I usually put it on here and then get my brake cleaner, spray it down, and then just wipe it down with some, make sure you're holding this on because you don't want it to fall, but you could put a nut in here too if you wanted to, but I just hold it. And so then just wipe that side down and then flip it around. Spray this side. Oops. Spray this side down. Wipe it down. Now that you got it cleaned, you want to put a lug nut on to hold it in. And I actually usually put 2 in just to make it a little bit more true to what it's going to be like. And you want to spin this rotor to make sure that the backing plate, it's not rubbing on the backing plate anywhere. Oh yeah. And so if you can hear noise like that, then it's rubbing on the backing plate. All right, so what we need to do is find out where those pieces are and bend them back so that it's not rubbing there. And after a little persuasion around where the caliper goes, you can tell that it's not hitting anything now, which is what you want. So that looks good to me. So let's get the caliper back on and torque down, and then we'll get the pads in. We want to get this caliper put back onto in the right position and get it mounted. So we want to unhook it from our hanger. And then make sure we got this back through the right way. All right, now we got one bolt in. We'll go ahead and get that all the way synced in and tight. Okay, now let's get the other bolt. Okay, so now we're going to torque those 2 bolts to 91 foot-pounds. Now we're going to put the fork back in, put this bolt back in, and the caliper will be secured. Okay, so we're going to put this bolt back in here. Again, this is a 12mm bolt. I'm going to snug it up here. And now we need to put this fork back in, and there's a little, it's hard to see, but there's a ridge around this metal piece right here that you got to hook this into, and you want to make sure that it's in there. So you want that little ridge, and you can feel it with this fork here, but you want it to make sure that goes in there, and then you just want to gently persuade that into place. All right, so now caliper's in place. We're ready for the new brake pads. These are the new pads we're using. Again, I got this from A1 Auto parts.com, and I'll have a link in the description. So now that we got the caliper mounted, we're going to put the brake pads in. And so I've got this brake lube grease that we're going to grease the pads before we put them in. And so on this pad, this goes in the back, just like this. And so when you slide that in, the pieces that are going to be touching metal are these edges here, this edge here, and this back is going to be, the pistons are going to be hitting that. So that's what we're going to grease with this brake lube on both brake pads. Okay, so I got good coating on the back here, and now I'm going to put it on the side right there, and then on this side here. So now we're ready to slide this in the caliper. Okay, now we do the same thing for the front. All right, so now slide this in, and if there's any grease that comes out, we want to clean that off. Okay, now we got the pads in, the calipers in, so let's just do a real quick check. So we made sure and put this bolt back in. We got the fork back in holding the brake line in place, and we've got those two bolts holding the caliper torqued and ready. So, and we got the pads in. So next thing we need is, again, like I was saying, the spring, the clip, and the pins come with the pack, the brake pad set. So we're gonna go ahead and put those in, and you just pull those out to where you have everything lines up. I'm only going to put that one partially in so that we can put this spring in here. And so it goes in like this to where this part of the spring is on the bottom, and you hook this pin on this side and loop it through here on the bottom. So let's do that. Okay, now this spring clips in, this edge clips in right here into these holes. Like that. Oh, but you want to make sure, I don't know if you can see this, this part here needs to be on top of the pad. So don't push that underneath, otherwise it won't spring back out like it's supposed to. Got that side. Okay, now that side's in. And then you want to make sure that this spring isn't anywhere close to this rotor, because you wouldn't want that to hit the rotor. If it is on there, you can just pull it up and bend it up and just make sure it stays out of the way. And I'm pushing down on it and it moves a little, but it's not going down in there. So we should be good to go. Now we just need to put the clips, the Carter keys in there, and we'll be done with the brake pads. All right, so now we're good there. We can hear it hitting the pad, which is fine, but there's nothing else that's hitting when we spin this. So we're going to take these two lug nuts off, put the wheel back on, torque everything back up, and we'll be done with the brakes. Okay, let's get this wheel back on. And I said we were done, but we do have to do one more thing once we get this wheel on, is we want to take it for a test drive and break in the rotors correctly. And so we'll talk about how to do that once we get this wheel on, and we'll get in the car and take it for a drive. So go ahead and hand tighten these all the way in, and then we're gonna lower it and then torque them to 83 foot-pounds, and then that'll be good. So as always, just make sure you torque this in the star pattern. Make sure you put even pressure on sinking it, snugging it up to the hub. All right, let's go for a ride. Okay, so we just started the car after replacing the pads and rotors, and I'm gonna push in on the brake pedal and make sure that, because we're gonna have that piston all the way, or those brake pads right up against the rotor. So now that that's been done, now we're gonna take this out on the road and do a few start and goes to properly break in the brake pads and rotors. I don't know, I found it on the internet somewhere. Basically, we're gonna speed up to 35 and moderately slow down to 5. Do that 2 or 3 times. We're gonna speed up to 55 and use strong braking pressure down to 5 miles an hour. I don't know what that means, we'll figure it out. And then we're just gonna drive around and cool the brakes down and let it park, or come back and park it, and then we should be good to go. So let's go. Okay, so we're gonna get up to 35. Slow down to 5. Okay, now we're going to do the 55. And apply strong braking pressure to get down to 5. Okay, do it again. Last time. Okay, now we're just gonna take it easy going back home and just drive normal for a few minutes, 5-10 minutes, and then we'll take it back home and we'll be done. All right, well that's it. That's how you replace the pads and rotors on a 07 4Runner. Thanks for watching. Hope it was helpful for you. And you know, think about subscribing if you want to. Or not, whatever. And leave some comments down below if you want to put some comments in. And if you want to check out some other 4Runner videos, check out the link up here. Thanks.